Hi everyone, today we're going to be going over basic Linux and privilege escalation in a Linux environment. I'll first go over some background information and shell commands, and then I will demonstrate a simple privilege escalation from a room in TryHackMe, a cybersecurity learning platform and a good resource if you end up really enjoying the content of this workshop. Let's get started. So Linux is an open source operating system, or OS, which is essentially a software that acts as an interface between the user and the computer hardware and also controls program operations. You can think of it like Windows, macOS, or iOS. There's one caveat to this though. Linux actually refers to the kernel of the OS, which controls the system's operations. This is what makes Linux so versatile. Any OS that uses a Linux kernel is considered a Linux distribution, so it is easily customizable. Technologies you are probably familiar with that use some variant of Linux include Instagram, Facebook, and Google, which use Linux servers. It may surprise you that cars use Linux under the hood as well. Often, it comes into play in cars that can sync with a driver's mobile device. Normally, when you would interact with Linux, it would be in the form of the shell terminal. So today we're going to focus on some useful Linux shell commands. First, some useful background information. Commands have attributes called flags, which can alter their behavior. In the example on the slide, ls is a command that lists all the files in the current directory, but adding a -l flag outputs the list in long format, which includes permissions, owners, groups, and file size. This might give you a better idea of what ls-l might return. I wanted to take this opportunity to explain file properties more in detail. So in this picture, the first leftmost blue circle represents permissions. The second circle represents the owner of the file, and the third represents the group that the file belongs to. At the permissions section, you might notice the letters R, W, and X. R means read, W means write, and X means execute. Starting after the dash, the first three letters are the permissions of the owner, the next three of the group, and then the next three of anyone else. This will come in handy during the TryHackMe room later. So going back to the background information, you can call man on a command if you want to know what it does or what flags it has. You can also call echo to literally echo your input back. If you call an environment variable, which is denoted by a dollar symbol, it will output the value of the variable into the console if a value exists. As you can see in the example below, I set the variable where to hack at home, so when I echo where, it outputs hack at home. So these are some of the useful commands. The navigation commands allow you to move up and down your file path and keep track of your position. File operators allow you to create and modify files. It may be helpful for you to pause this video and take a look at what's listed. Some advanced commands we will be using today are su and sudo. Su allows you to switch users without having to log in and out. For example, if I were on my account but I wanted to log into a friend's, I would type su friend's username and I would be prompted for my friend's password. Though sudo sounds similar to su, it has a different function. Running a program as sudo would allow you to run as a super user, which has unrestricted access to all commands, files, and directories. Not every user has the authority to use sudo, which we will see later in the TryHackMe room. Privilege escalation is exploiting flaws in an app to a system to get access to something you normally cannot have access to. This is how hackers may obtain sensitive data like passwords. One way to do this is to exploit pseudo rights, which we mentioned just before, and we'll see this in the TryHackMe room. The example we will do today is very simple, so there will not be any use of outside tools. But more sophisticated privilege escalation will usually use tools like Nmap, which scans an application for vulnerabilities, as well as Dirbuster or Hydra, which brute force content to breach web servers or passwords. So now we're going to move on to the TryHackMe room. It's called Learn Linux. To get set up, you need to create a TryHackMe account, install their OpenVPN, and then also install PuTTY and SSH client. The first step will have a deploy button for the TryHackMe machine, and then the instructions and the steps below it will help you log into the Linux environment. This is the TryHackMe Learn Linux room. I've already accessed the TryHackMe machine remotely through SSH, and I'm now ready to navigate through its Linux environment. As a brief overview, the room goes over Linux basics and asks you to use the information to complete tasks. Since we've already gone over some commands in the presentation, I'm going to go ahead and walk you through the tasks, which include finding the passwords for 3 users, as well as exploiting pseudo-rights to obtain hidden text. So just as a heads up, I completed this room before I made the workshop, and unfortunately I was not able to erase my answers. So while this workshop will have the correct answers on here, I will also make sure to walk through everything and make sure you know how to get there. So for the first task, it seems the objective is to find the password for a user called Shiba2. To do that, we need to create a file called newt.txt, and then we run the Shiba1 file to get the password. So I'm going to open my environment over here in the top right corner. I'm going to use the touch command to create newt.txt, and I'm going to ls to make sure that that worked. So I see that there's a newt.txt and a Shiba1 inside of my current directory, which looks correct. So I'm going to run the Shiba1 file. So it looks like the password for Shiba2 is pinguftw. And the way that this room works is that once you get the password for a new user, you should log in using su. So I'm going to do that for Shiba2. Okay, so as you can see, I was previously Shiba1, but now I am Shiba2. So I'm going to move on to the next task. So this one says to check to see if the environment variable test1234 exists and if it's set equal to the current user environment variable. So I'm going to use the echo command to see if test1234 exists. Sorry. And it looks like nothing has popped up. So I'm just going to use the export command to set that equal to the current user. And now I'm going to do the echo again to make sure it went through. And it looks like we got the correct answer, which is Shiba2. So now we have to run the Shiba2 file, and I'm going to navigate to the Shiba2 home directory in order to access that. So I'm going to use cd and the squiggly mark right here to denote home. So I'm going to ls now that we're in the home directory, and I see that we do have a Shiba2 file in there, and I'm going to go ahead and run it. So the word that we get here is happy newt noises, and that happens to be Shiba3's password. So we have successfully finished 2 out of 3 tasks. So now I am going to su into Shiba3. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next task, which is finding the password for Shiba4. So this task is going to be a little more complicated than the first 2. The first step requires us to find Shiba4, and then the second step requires us to check if there's a directory called test in our home directory, as well as whether there's a file in there called test1234. So for the first part of the task, we need to find Shiba4, but we have no idea where it is. So we're going to use the find command and likely search the entire system, so it'd be searching from the root. Since we have some other information, like the fact that the name of the file is Shiba4, and we know that Shiba4 is a file and not a directory, we can use tags to make the search more specific. So I feel like this is a pretty great opportunity to introduce how to use man. So if we do man find, we can see that there's name, there's a synopsis, including a bunch of the flags that come with this command, and then there's also a description. So if you ever feel stuck on a command, you can call man and it'll tell you how to use it. But for this question specifically, we'll use find on the root, and then After that, we're going to use the name tag for SHIBA4, and then we're going to use the type tag for file. So after the search is complete, we just have to find which paths have SHIBA4. And it looks like here we have opt secret SHIBA4. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this file path, and then I am going to complete the second part. So first, it says check that there's a directory called test in our home directory. We're not currently in our home directory, so I'm going to use cd and the squiggly to go home. I'm going to ls to see what there is, and there is definitely a test directory in there. So now we have to check that there's a file called test1234 inside of the test directory. So I'm going to cd into test and ls once again, and we can see that there is a test1234 file. So with that, I am just going to run the path that we have, and it looks like the password for SHIBA4 is test1234. So now that that's finished, I am going to log in as SHIBA4. And now we can move on to our final task. So the last task is our most accurate example of privilege escalation. We will be trying to access the contents of a file that we normally wouldn't have access to as a normal user. And so we'll be exploiting pseudo privileges in order to do that. So right now we're trying to find the content in /root/root.txt. I'm going to go ahead and navigate to the root to see what's up. And then I'm going to ls to see what else is in there. So I currently have root here, and I'm going to see if I can go even further. And it looks like my permission is denied. So since my permission is denied, I'm curious what permissions there are in general. So I'm going to use ls with the -l flag to get a longer format and better detail of what's going on. So it looks like for root specifically, only the owner has read, write, and execute access, and nobody else has any permissions. And then the owner here is root. So that means I'm going to have to run anything related to this file with sudo. So in order to check that I have sudo permission, I'm going to use the command sudo-l. And then once I put in my password, I'll see if I'm on a list. So it says, sorry, SHIBA4 may not run sudo on new. So I'm going to go ahead and check if there are any other Shiba users that can use sudo. I'm going to use sudo-l as well. Sorry, SHIBA3 cannot. Do SHIBA2. Sorry, SHIBA2 may not run sudo. And then I'm going to try my hand at SHIBA1. So it looks like none of the Shiba users are able to use sudo. So I'm thinking that within the files, there's going to be some sort of a file that contains a user and the password for sudo. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to say that SHIBA2 contains a file that has a username and a password that allows us to gain access to sudo. So in order to find that, I'm going to use find once again. The user I'm specifying is SHIBA2, and the file type I'm specifying is F. So the file that we're looking for looks a little bit strange compared to most of the other ones that turn up on the search. So this one, var log test1234, is what we're looking for. So we're going to save that and we're going to see if we can run it. So it looks like permission is denied once again. And I want to get a better idea of what the permissions are. So I'm going to run ls-l one more time. So it looks like the owner of this is Shiba2, and Shiba2 has read permissions. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to log in as Shiba2. And I am going to see what the contents of this are. So it looks like the contents say Newt Newt not so fast. It looks like Newt Newt is the user and not so fast is the password. So I am going to su into Newt Newt. Just to see if Newt Newt has sudo permissions. I'm going to run -l on it. And turns out that there are no restrictions for this user. So then with that, I am going to run /root/root.txt, and that is the secret message that we were supposed to find. So that is all for the presentation and the code along. I hope you guys learned something new today, and good luck hacking.